if someone who is interested in geopolitics to represent our nation, however, let us assume that person is from rural India, not that good in English, whether it will become a handicap in later years or one can acquire that skill?
This is a very interesting question, Mr. Israel. I think a lot of our, very, very capable, aspiring officers tend to kind of, underestimate themselves in this particular, area. Language certainly is important, but you need not be a brilliant orator or you need not be a wordsmith to be an excellent, foreign service officer. You need to be an effective communicator. That's all. That is what is required. Obviously, the rest of the things, like, you can kind of, refine it during your extensive, training period, and of course, during your career also. So people coming from, rural areas with no fancy kind of a language skills or like, pedigree, they need not have absolutely any second thoughts about giving foreign service as their option. If they are interested, if they have the natural inclination and aptitude to areas which I had mentioned, and besides that, they also have the curiosity to kind of learn new things, to adapt new things, to explore a new culture, new way of living. These people will make excellent diplomats. In fact, I know from my own personal experience, lots of excellent, top class diplomats who have come from absolutely kind of, small towns with no fancy kind of schools or colleges or universities to back them up, but have made to be like, have kind of, finally turned out to be excellent top rate diplomats. I'm sure, like, the same thing, can apply to anybody who has got the right attitude.
Now, for an IFS officer, what is the split? Is there any ratio of posting within our country and abroad? Is there any particular ratio?
There is no fixed ratio as such, but generally what we see is roughly the tenure is like 2:1. That is, in posting you do 2, and like in headquarters you do 1. So like in a career of, let's say, 30 years, 20 years you tend to do in the mission abroad and 10 years in headquarters in India. So that is the general kind of proportion of service in headquarters and mission. But then again, it varies from officers to officer also.
Okay. Now, the common perception amongst the civil service aspirants, in fact, civil servants also, as well as common man, is IFS is something, a luxurious service. They have a class apart and they are paid much higher than others. What is your view on this?
See, I think, again, as you mentioned rightly, it is a perception. Perhaps perceptions do not always tally with the facts. But let me put it this way. A life of a foreign service officer is important for any aspiring candidate or officer to know this. A life of an officer, government officer, anywhere it is, whether it is administrative service or foreign service, it cannot be a life of luxury. But certainly, I would say that it is a very comfortable living. And particularly for foreign service officers, government does give a lot of, facilities when you are posted abroad. That makes for a very comfortable living. But then along with that comes the mandatory baggage of having to shift every couple of years. For the first couple of times, perhaps it'll be nice. You get to see the exotic places and you get to see new people, new culture, experience, new things. But then after a point of time, you imagine the kind of strain on the family when they have to shift constantly, not from one district to another district or one state to another state, shift from one country, one continent to another continent, one culture, one language to another thing, and then imagine the kind of stress on the family, the systems and all. But on the balance, considering everything, taking into account all these, it is still a very comfortable living, and the government takes care of its officers and staff who are posted out do the job of the government in a very generous way. So that way, I mean, it's a comfortable living, but it would not be kind of a classified by any means as a life of luxury. I mean, there are certain kind of facilities that are afforded, that are given to the officer, but then along with that comes the responsibilities. You are given a certain kind of a privilege, or you are given a certain kind of facility, essentially to ensure that your functioning as an officer is is fully taken care. It is a supporting system for you to function as required by the government. It is linked to that, not like as a kind of a luxury or a privilege attached to the job. It is something which is required functionally as an officer abroad.
And your expense, the other side is your expenses are also will be pretty high because you are in other countries. See, the rice, wheat, tomato, potato, whatever we can buy here at a much lesser rate, whatever we commonly use, whereas you may have to get the imported products. Now, my other side of the question is whether that extra salary, whatever that foreign allowance, whether with that you'll be much comfortable.
Yes, yes, yes. As I said, like, I mean, the whole package is arranged in such a way that the officers and staff who are sent out to, carry out the responsibilities of a government, they are taken care, and they are taken, and they work in a comfortable way. I mean, you cannot, of course, expect an officer or a staff to work, I mean, in an optimal way if he's like, strained all the time in the personal side. So, I mean, the system takes care in such a way that the officer is having adequate support system to function in an optimal way. In the instance which you asked specifically about the foreign allowance, it is given in lieu of the dearness allowance that is normally given to government officers in India, and this is quite generous. And it, of course, kind of is based on the cost of living in a particular station, and it is it of course varies. Let's say from New York it's different, from Canberra it's in Canberra it's different, in Colombo it may be different. It takes into account the local cost of living, and also the requirement that would be needed by an officer of that particular status, what his kind of a basket of commodities that he would be usually like spending money on. And this foreign allowance is calculated in such a way that it adequately takes care of the requirements of the officer and his family members.
Can you tell something about that diplomatic passport? All Hindi, but only IFS officers can have the diplomatic passport. What is it, a different passport, or what exactly is the diplomatic passport?
I think these are some of the things, like which I think look exotic from outside, but then like once you are inside as a passport officer or as a foreign service officer or an officer of MEA, you get to see the functional kind of exigencies behind having a travel document like this. As I said, passport is a travel document, and diplomatic passport is one of the three types of passport that is being issued by the government of India, the other being an ordinary passport and an official passport. And the diplomatic passport, incidentally, is not limited only to foreign service officers. It can also be given to senior officers in government of India also, when they are proceeding on official visits. But then limiting it to the Ministry of External Affairs, it is given to all senior officers who are traveling abroad and who are required to carry out certain official responsibilities. These passports have their own privileges because it is required. A diplomat's responsibilities are sensitive, and in order to ensure that he is able to carry out his responsibilities in a proper way, this norm has been put in place over a long period of time, that he will have certain privileges according to the Vienna Protocol, according to the Geneva Conventions, Vienna Conventions of Diplomatic Relations, the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations, and again the conventions on the travel documents and all. The travel documents for diplomats, their dependent members, the travel documents for other members of the diplomatic mission. Everything has been laid out after a long kind of long kind of history behind it. So these diplomatic passports, it is given to any officer who gets into the foreign service right at the beginning itself. For others who get in at the bottom level and then have to work their way up, it is given after they attain a particular seniority in the government service in Ministry of External Affairs. But for officers getting into foreign service immediately, they are given a diplomatic passport. It gives them certain basic kind of privileges. Perhaps in the airport you would see there are certain diplomatic counters which helps them to kind of move through the immigration quicker, and also it gets kind of extra privilege, respect, and like processing is done accordingly. But then again, it's not all the time like it's completely positive. But along with diplomatic passport also comes sometimes additional scrutiny also. You have to be prepared for both. In places like in some friendly countries, perhaps like a diplomatic passport will will mean like you are getting additional privileges. I mean, it looked like that. But in certain other countries, like I do not want to mention the name of the countries, but like having a diplomatic passport may mean that like you would be put under additional scrutiny, not just you but also your dependent family members and all. So it's a mixed baggage. Sometimes in a friendly country, diplomatic passport, I mean, you feel like there are privileges attached to it. Everywhere, of course, I mean, a diplomatic passport is supposed to have its own privileges. But then in a friendly country, you tend to perceive it, a little more on the positive side. But there are certain other countries where, like, having a diplomatic passport, it kind of singles out a person for additional scrutiny also. Not just the person, the diplomat, but also his immediate family members also. It's a kind of a mixed bag. But then on the balance, like, it is certainly a great, privilege and honor to be holding a diplomatic passport. And I was telling that, like, I am I'm feeling quite privileged to be holding to be given a diplomatic passport by the government.
Now, everyone uses the word diplomat. Now, you are a real diplomat. What is the diplomatic or diplomat? What does it mean?
See, again, like, if you have to, put it in a nutshell, like, very simply put, it's something which has got to do a lot with tact. How you get your objective achieved without, without upsetting the other side, either in word or in action. How you're able to achieve your end objective without hurting, without making the other side feel bad. That is, in essence, a diplomat's job. It is quite easy, to say this. It's easier said than done. But then that is what we are supposed to do. We will be operating, of course, in changing circumstances. Sometimes it can be kind of a cordial. Sometimes it can be completely kind of, aggressive kind of atmosphere or circumstances you are going to be operating in. And obviously the interest of people across the table is not going to be the same. You will be representing the interest of your country, and certainly in most cases it will not be similar or aligned to the interest of the person on the other side of the table. How you go about doing this job of getting your interests done at the end of the day, without, of course, like hurting the other side in your word or action. That is what is in essence a diplomat's job, and that is what diplomatic means to me.